Reading from the Gospel of Mark, chapter 8, beginning in verse 14. The disciples had forgotten to bring bread, except for one loaf they had with them in the boat. "Be careful," Jesus warned them. "Watch out for the yeast of the Pharisees and that of Herod." They discussed this with one another and said, "It is because we have no bread." Aware of their discussion, Jesus asked them, "Why are you talking about having no bread? Do you still not see or understand? Are your hearts hardened? Do you have eyes but fail to see, and ears but fail to hear? And don't you remember? When I broke the 5 loaves for the 5,000, how many basketfuls of pieces did you pick up?" 12, they replied. "And when I broke the 7 loaves for the 4,000, how many basketfuls of pieces did you pick up?" They answered, 7. He said to them, "Do you still not understand?"
There was a woman who was leaving a hotel after a meeting. And as she was leaving, she started looking for her keys. And she couldn't find them. She looked in her pockets, and then she searched all through her purse, and she couldn't find her keys. And then she remembered, they may be in the car. She had this habit of leaving her keys in the ignition because she thought that would be a great place not to lose them. If they're always in the ignition, you can always find them, right? But her husband said, what's going to happen? One of these days your car's going to be stolen. So she goes out to the parking garage. She looks all around. She can't find her car, and her stomach sinks. She's like, somebody stole my car. So she calls the police and reports her car stolen. And she just sits down, and she just dreads making this phone call. So finally she picks up the phone and she calls her husband. "Sweetie," that's what we get, right? "Sweetie, I know what you said. Somebody stole my car. I'm so sorry. I know. On the other end, just silence. "Have you lost your mind? I dropped you at the hotel." Oh my gosh, I can't believe that. "Well, can you come and get me?" "Well, sure, as soon as I convince this cop that I didn't steal your car." Memory's a terrible thing, isn't it? I don't know about you, but I can't remember the things I used to remember. It's hard. We're forgetful people. I want to do a 3-sermon series, and I have 2 weeks to do it. You know what that means, right? I want to talk to you about three things. I want to take a look back. I want to commit to remember. And then next week we want to move forward. We want to look at the future. We want to look in the future. We want to look forward. Today, I want to talk about looking back and remembering. When we, first of all, the word remember is important in the Bible because it's mentioned, a version of the word remember is mentioned over 500 times. I think God understands that it's hard for us to remember, but I also think it's something that's important for us to do. But first, we have to look back. We have to recognize what God has done for us. In Mark chapter 8, Natalie just read the scripture that the disciples had forgot to bring bread. They forgot to bring bread, and they happened to have 1 loaf on the boat. Have you ever been focused on something and then someone else starts to talk to you and you're not really catching what they say? I'm a person who focuses on one thing at a time. And it doesn't really matter a lot about what else is going on. I'm focused on one thing. The other day we were sitting at the dining room table, and it was late morning, and I'm reading an article, and I'm dialed into it, and Natalie says, jackets and jeans are in 2025. I said, what? She said, jackets and jeans are in 2025. And my brain still has not transferred from what I was thinking about to what she's talking about. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And she looks at me with this just beautiful smile and says, I'm speaking English. Jeans and jackets are in 2025. That's my life. Because something happens, it's kind of strange here in this passage. Jesus says something that doesn't fit. Why does he say, watch out for the yeast of the Pharisees and that of Herod? Why does he say that? It doesn't really fit unless you back up. If you back up just a few verses to verse 11, it says, the Pharisees came and began to question Jesus. To test him, they asked him for a sign from heaven. He sighed deeply and said, why does this generation ask for a sign? Truly, I tell you, no sign will be given to it. And then they get in the boat and leave. Jesus is still focused on the conversation and the interaction he has just had with the Pharisees. And he's given the disciples a warning. Don't let the yeast of the Pharisees and the religious leaders grow in you. Don't let their evil take root in your heart and grow like yeast. But he said the word yeast, and so the disciples think he's talking about them. They think he's talking about them not having any bread. Have you ever been guilty of something and somebody says something and you think they're talking about you? That's what's happening. And Jesus knows what they're talking about. He says, you're talking about bread. Don't you remember? There's 13 people on the boat. They got one loaf of bread. And they're worried about not having anything to eat. And Jesus said, don't you remember when I fed 5,000 men? And as we've talked about before, it's probably in the numbers of 15 to 20,000 when you include children and women. With 5 loaves and 2 fish. Do you remember that story? Jesus has been teaching these people, and this huge crowd is gathered. And it comes to the end of the day, and they're hungry, and Jesus looks at his disciples, and he says, feed them. And they said, how can we do that? How can we possibly feed this many people? And then Jesus says, what do you have? They were so focused on what they didn't have. Don't we do that all the time? Don't we focus on the things we don't have? But God, I'm not good at that. I'm not a good singer. Or God, I'm not a good speaker or a teacher. Or I don't have very much money. Or I don't have a big home. Or I don't. We spend so much of our time and energy thinking about what we don't have. But Jesus says, what do you have? And they said, 5 loaves and 2 fish from a little boy. And in their hands, what they had wasn't enough. It was too little. So what did they do? They gave it to Jesus. And Jesus took it and he blessed it. And then what did he do? the multiplication didn't happen in the hands of Jesus. It happened when he gave it back to them. Jesus gave the same amount back to them. And he said, now go and feed the people. How do you feed 15,000 people with 12? Well, you get them in small groups and you go and you start handing out food. Here's some bread. Take too much. Here. No. And then you go to the next one. And it keeps happening. The multiplication came in the giving. They had to take what they had and they had to go do something with it. And that's when it started to multiply. What do you have? Not what you don't have. What do you have? And what can God use? How can he do that? I'm going to keep going. So this happens once, and don't you think if you were a part of Jesus feeding 5,000 men, 15,000 people, do you think you'd remember that? Do you know that this happened twice? Did you realize that this happens twice? He feeds 5,000, and then later on he feeds 4,000, and the disciples have the same concerns that they did the time before. How can we do it? Don't you think that they would remember? But they didn't. And here they are on a boat with just 13 people and one loaf of bread, and they're like, we forgot the bread, what are we going to do? And Jesus says, don't you remember? We're no different. What has God done for you this year? What provisions has God made for you this year? You may want to write that down. We have to look back and we have to realize what God has already done for us. Remember that time this year when you didn't think the money was going to make it through? You weren't going to be able to pay your bills, or you weren't going to be able to provide? You didn't know where it was going to come from, and somehow it did. Remember that time this year when you were so sick? And maybe it was a health scare and you thought, I don't know if I'm going to make it. Or maybe it was a loved one. And you prayed, God, I need you. We need you to do this. And he did. Do you remember that? My challenge to you today is to look back on 2024 over the next couple of days before the end of the year. Don't put it off. Schedule a time, sit down, and as a family maybe think about, what did God do for us this year? That's the end of sermon number 1. So if we do that, how can we remember? How can we remember? How can we remember not to forget? We can create memorials, don't you think? Don't you think there are things that we can do, memorials that we can grasp onto to help us remember? I have a couple of ideas. Then you may like these, you may not, and it's okay. The first idea is right here. How many of you have a phone that has pictures that pop up randomly? On my iPhone, I have this little thing here, and I get random pictures that pop up. Do you guys have that? Raise your hand. I can't. Okay. Yeah. Great. Do you love that? I love it. Because every once in a while, maybe on a daily basis, I look down at that and then I click it and I can go through and find all kinds of pictures from the past. As long as I've had my phone, these random pictures show up and they remind me of places I've been and people that I love. I love that. In our house, the first floor of our house is our living area. Kind of we have living room, dining room, kitchen, master bedroom, but that's a guest bedroom and a bathroom. And that's where everybody else exists with us. If you come to our house, you'll be on the first floor. But on the second floor is our bedroom and our bathroom, and then there's a hallway, and we each have an office. And in the hallway between our bedroom and our offices, Natalie has created this wall of pictures of just she and I and all the places we've been. There's probably a dozen pictures there, maybe more. And they're pictures of places that we've gone together and pictures of just the two of us in all of these places. And it's a great reminder as I walk down that hallway of the things that we've done. Maybe you need to take a picture when God has provided for you, when God has done something in your life. Maybe you need to have a provision wall in your house. Maybe you find just a little place and you take pictures and you put it up there, and then when other people say to you, "What's that?" you can say, "That's the place where God has done things in my life." We just come through Christmas. We get Christmas ornaments from every place that we go. I know this would be unconventional. My wife would cringe a little bit. But what if you had a tree in your house that was up all year long, and every time God provided something for you? Maybe it was a medical condition and God healed you. You buy a ornament that's a stethoscope and you hang it on the tree. And God helped you make the truck payment. And so you get a little truck ornament and you hang it on the tree. And throughout the year, every time God does something, you get a symbol of that and you hang it on the tree. And then when people are at your house or your kids are around, they say, "What's that?" "That's my provision tree. That's what God has done in my life." I like wooden boxes. I collect some different wooden boxes. And when I first was diagnosed with diabetes, every day, Natalie would fix me a breakfast in a bag, and she would write a note of encouragement to me as I was trying to change my eating habits and get control of my blood sugar. And every day she would write a note, and I bought a little box, and I put those notes in that box every day. I had a stack of them. It was full. I still have that box. It's in my office today. Maybe you need to buy a wooden box, and every time God does something in your life, you write it down and you put it in the box. And at the end of the year, you sit down with your family and you open that box up and you go through all of those pages and you talk about with your family what God has done. How can we remember? We got to look back. What has God done in your life? How can you remember? And you may look at me and think, "Junior, that's stupid. That's crazy. I'm not going to do that." Okay. But let me tell you, God did. God does that. What happens when you see a rainbow? What do you think of when you see a rainbow? Somebody say it out loud. Say it again. God's promise. He's never going to flood the earth. Let's look at Genesis. "I establish my covenant with you. Never again will all life be cut off by the waters of the flood. Never again will there be a flood to destroy the earth. I have set my rainbow in the clouds, and it will be the sign of the covenant between me and the earth." God said, I'm going to help you remember. I know that you'll forget, but I won't forget. And he even says, it will remind me. God said it will remind him of the promise. There's another time that God said to remember. It's in Joshua. The children of Israel had been wandering in the wilderness, waiting to go into the promised land, and they come to the Jordan River. And the Jordan River is between them and the promised land, and they have to cross it, about 1 million people. And so in Joshua it says, when the whole nation had finished crossing the Jordan, the Lord said to Joshua, choose 12 men among the people, one from each tribe, and tell them to take up 12 stones from the middle of the Jordan, right where the priest stood, and to carry them with you and put them down at a place where you will stay. When they got to the Jordan, the Ark of the Covenant went into the waters, and just like the Red Sea, the waters stopped, and all of these people walked across on dry land. And God said, here's what I want you to do. I want you to go get 12 stones, one from each tribe. And he says, I want you to have them put it on their shoulder. He wasn't talking about little pebbles. He wanted them to make a monument of 12 stones. And he says, when your children ask you, what's that? What is that? You say, that's where God provided for us. See, that's what God is up to. He said, remember and put things in place so that you will. The Israelites had been in captivity and foreigners for 400 years. That's a long time. And God sent Moses to talk to Pharaoh. And he said, tell Pharaoh to let my people go. And Pharaoh wouldn't listen to him. So God brought plagues. And as each plague God brought, as it would get really bad, at the worst of each plague, the Pharaoh would say, okay, stop the plague and I'll let your people go. And the plague would stop, and then he would renege and he would say no. And it happened time after time after time. 9 times it happened. 9 times. And then, one last time, in Exodus, God says, Moses said, the Lord says this, about midnight I will go through Egypt, and all the firstborn in the land of Egypt will die. There will be loud crying in all of the land of Egypt, more than has ever been heard before and will ever be heard again. Each family is to choose a lamb, one without spot or blemish, the best in all the flock. Select the animals for your families and slaughter the Passover lamb, because death had to happen to cover sin. Take a bunch of hyssop, dip it into the blood in the basin, and put some of the blood on the top and on both sides of the door frame. And on that same night, I will pass through Egypt and strike down every firstborn of both people and animals, and I will bring judgment on all the God, small g, of Egypt. I am the Lord. The blood will be a sign for you on the houses where you are. And when I see the blood, I will pass over you. No destructive plague will touch you when I strike Egypt. And then he says, this is a day you are to commemorate. Remember. For the generations to come, you shall celebrate it as a festival to the Lord. God says, I want you to remember. This is significant. This is going to be worse than anything that they've seen. But I will protect you. And then I want you to commemorate this day. And they did. The feast, the festival of the Passover. They celebrated it every year. And it was a big deal. Everybody comes back for Passover. Almost kind of like homecoming, right? You can go ahead. Come on. Just like homecoming. Everybody comes back. You see old friends and family. And it's a celebration. It's a festival. It takes days. And then there's this special meal that happens. They get together to remember that night when God came through and the blood protected him. And so they have this special meal and all of these things that they have to do. And they did it. For 1,500 years, they celebrated this. And then one night, Jesus, as he's celebrating it with his disciples, said, I've got something to add to this. I'm going to change it. I'm going to fulfill it. So he picked up the bread, this bread that was unleavened, no yeast, because they had to leave fast. And he picked it up and he broke it. And he said, this is my body. And they didn't understand. And then he took the cup of wine and he said, this is my blood. It's a new covenant. This is a new promise. And as often as you drink this, remember me. Don't think about the Passover anymore. Remember me. And then they didn't really understand that. And then Jesus, the next day, goes out and he dies on a cross. And when God sees that blood on our heart, when we accept Jesus and that blood is applied to our heart, then he passes over us. We're one of his. We're going to take some time right now and celebrate and remember. See, we have these things, these elements to help us, remind us to remember. So if you have communion with you right now, Natalie's going to sing a beautiful song. I want you to take some time to remember. And as you take communion and as you remember Jesus, then I want you to think about this year. What has God done for you? Let's do that together.